Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's
Superman. Superman. This is a Geek History lesson on Superman.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I'm Jason. Krypton has blown up Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson, and welcome to your Mind University, because you have stumbled onto the podcast where we take one character, construct, or last son of Krypton from popular culture and teach you everything that you need to know about them in about an hour. And today we are finally tackling the Man of Steel himself.
That's right. This little known hero known as Superman. Many people I don't think read his comic books anymore.
No.
But we're finally tackling him. He's been requested for a long time. We've gone 108 episodes without talking about the Man of Steel. Superman, one of my favorite superheroes of all time because I'm from his home state. And we're kind of talking about him because we're in the middle of Batman v Superman hysteria.
Yeah, we sure are.
Which mainly exists in Ohio, I've heard.
Oh, yeah. Midwest.
They love the Superman. I actually know a state of Kansas. My home state is going nuts about Batman v Superman.
There you go. Go
nuts
Kansas.
They are. They love wheat and they love their Superman.
And they love you.
So before we start this podcast about Superman, you may be wondering, why are we calling this Superman the Golden Age? I don't know if you're wondering this at all.
Why are you calling it Superman the Golden Age?
Well, I'm glad you finally asked, Ashley. And that is because Superman is such a character with a huge history. 75 years, over 75 years now of history. And we don't want to summarize or leave out any part of it. So we're really only covering the Golden Age of Superman. And we're going to explain what the Golden Age means in just a second. But to really give you a timeline, we are covering the adventures of Superman and his history from 1938 to 1956.
All right, so that's about 18 years.
That's right. Now, there will be more Superman Geek History lessons in the future. We will do
that's a relief.
All of his history up to current day. But to actually let you understand and learn, this is the way we have to do it.
We want to marinate in the Superman history.
Exactly. So let me tell you what I meant by the Golden Age.
Please do.
Now, the Golden Age is a marker of time in comic book history, if you don't know. There's the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, the Modern Age. They haven't quite decided what the age is we're in now.
The postmodern age.
I've heard it's maybe the postmodern age. Some people call it the Digital Age, that maybe the Digital Age starts with the New 52.
Sure.
I don't know.
Doesn't matter.
I think it gets decided down the line. But anyways, we're talking about the Golden Age.
Cool.
Because we're not in anymore, and we can talk about it. Now, the beginning of the Golden Age is cited to be the 1938 debut of Superman in Action Comics #1.
Oh, well, that's convenient.
Yes. Now, of course, Action Comics #1 was published by Detective Comics. Of course, the predecessor of DC Comics. That's kind of where DC comes from. Get it?
Golly gee.
Yep. And the Golden Age ended with the beginning of the Silver Age of comic books, which is generally recognized as the beginning of the debut of the first successful new superhero since the Golden Age, which is actually The Flash, when he showed up in Showcase #4 in October of 1956.
That Barry Allen, though.
Yep. Now, because that happened in the mid-1950s, the Silver Age anyways, because superhero comics declined after World War II. And the end of the Golden Age of comics, the editors of DC decided to revive some of their Golden Age superheroes with completely new origins and backstories, hence why The Flash went from being Jay Garrick to Barry Allen.
Yes.
And just to let you know, there were actually 2 versions of Superman in the DCU during the 1950s.
Were there really?
Yes.
That's awesome.
And because it was retroactively declared that the version of Superman that was published between 1938 and the early 1950s lived on Earth 2, while comics featuring Superman published since the mid-50s took place on Earth 1. However, since Superman is one of several DC characters that has been continuously published, now let that sink in. There has never been a period of time since 1938 when there wasn't a Superman title being published.
That is very, very impressive.
There's very few heroes that, well, there is no other hero that has that legacy of 1938. I mean, Batman's got it with 1939.
Yes.
But there you go. So, since they never stopped publishing Superman during the 50s, even though superheroes declined, there isn't a clear dividing line between Earth 1 and Earth 2 Superman. So several stories published in the mid-50s, 1950s, took place on Earth 1, whereas others retroactively took place on Earth 2, and nobody really quite knows.
And it doesn't matter.
But it doesn't matter. We are going to focus on the Adventures of Superman from 1938 to 1956.
Cool.
So now we can hop into the first section of our podcast, the 10-cent origin.
And the 10-cent origin is where we tell you all the cliff notes, all the basic info, all of the who and the what's and the whys of this character in case you go to a really cool cocktail party for Batman v Superman and someone's like, yo, what's up with this Superman?
Yes, in the Golden Age.
Specifically in the Golden Age.
Now, his real name is Kal-El. That's dash with an L, no E. The E was dropped retroactively when it was decided that this was an Earth 2 character. His other name is Clark Kent, his Earth name. He was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. His relatives are Jor-El, his birth father, Laura-El, his birth mother, John Kent, Mary Kent, Lois Lane Kent, who eventually became his wife. Lucille Lane Tompkins, sister-in-law. George Tompkins was a brother-in-law. Power Girl was his cousin. Zor-El was his uncle. And Allura Inzi was his aunt. And his affiliations are the Justice Society of America and the All-Star Squadron. And his base of operations is Metropolis and the Secret Sanctuary. I will tell you more about the Secret Sanctuary later.
Ooh, I'm excited.
And his first appearance, of course, was in probably the most famous comic book of all time, Action Comics #1, June of 1938. Also the most valuable comic book of all time.
Easily, yeah.
So let's go to the Meet Cute section.
The Meet Cute section of the podcast is a term that we stole from romantic comedy writing where we tell you the first time we met this character and how cute it was.
Now, since this is the Golden Age Superman, actually, I have a specific instance where I met the Golden Age Superman. I want to change this. Instead of asking you where you first met Superman, I want to ask you, have you ever read Action Comics #1?
No.
Never?
No.
Have you ever read any of the Golden Age, the early Superman stories?
No.
None of them?
No, never.
Okay, this is, you have none.
Okay, I read Superman #76, which is the first time that he meets Batman.
There you go.
So that would be the only one.
Well, I have read Action Comics #1, and I actually got to read it in late junior high, one of my last years of junior high, because my friend, his name was Dennis. He's not a cool dude.
Okay.
But at the time, I thought he was a cool dude. And he had these giant archive editions of Action Comics #1 and Batman #1. And they were huge. They were like 2 feet by like a foot. It was insane.
Wow.
But they were like really kind of torn up. But I mean, at the time, I thought they were the legit deal. I thought they were the real deal.
And I'm sure he led you to believe that they were the real deal.
Oh, I'm certain he showed up. That's why Dennis is not a good dude. But that's how I read Action Comics and Batman #1 for the very first time.
That's really cool.
Okay. So let's hop into History 101.
Yes, the main meat of the lesson where we dive deep into the Kryptonian realms and the crystals of Golden Age Superman.
All right. So first we're going to talk about the real world history of Superman before we go to the fictional history. In 1933, Jerry Siegel wrote a short story called Reign of the Superman. Now, in that story, a vagrant gets psychic power and uses them for profit, only to lose them again and become a vagrant again and at the same time, he's very ashamed that how he misused his powers.
Well, morality tales are important.
Later in 1933, he developed another hero called Superman, or another character. This one was actually a hero, and it had some of the elements that we know. The names Clark Kent, Lois Lane, and so on.
Ooh.
But he was merely a strong man and had no superpowers and no costume.
Okay.
Now, a strongman, of course, is the guy in the tight tights with the big mustache, the superhero, the circus strongman.
Who sometimes lifts trapezoid weights.
Yep. So Siegel had Joe Shuster draw that story up into a comic book, and they submitted it to several companies, but they kept getting turned down.
Aww.
Siegel first thought it was because the companies didn't think that Shuster was a good enough artist. So
what a dick thing to think.
A little bit. So Siegel wanted to fire him. And when Shuster found out about this, he responded by burning the Strongman comic book and only sparing the cover.
Wow, that's a totally rock and roll way to react. Yeah. I love it.
So Siegel made another Superman comic with another artist named Russell Keaton. And in this comic, Superman further evolved. Except this is kind of neat. I didn't know this. Okay. I had never heard this about. In this story, Earth is in the far future, and it's about to explode. And the last surviving man sends his child back in time to 1935, where he's adopted by Sam and Molly Kent. This child has great strength and bulletproof skin, and they teach him to use his powers for good. He can't fly or anything like that, but he's a time travel baby. However, this comic was
travel baby.
This comic was also rejected by several companies as well.
There's so many elements though that you can see from the classic Superman origin. It's very interesting.
Now, Siegel eventually reunited with Schuster. And at the time, they both got jobs with National Allied Publications, which at the time had expressed interest in Superman. They began to develop the concept more, and the familiar costume showed up. The alien nature of Superman became part of the story. And then they submitted Superman to a company called Detective Comics. Detective Comics loved it, and Siegel and Schuster sold all the rights to Superman to Detective Comics for, at the time, $130. Now, adjusted for inflation, that is $2,200 today.
That's still, for a character that became as iconic as Superman did, I mean, that's nothing. That's insane.
That's very low, I think.
Yeah.
Because I honestly think you could make the argument for Superman being the most famous character of all time.
You could. You definitely could.
His symbol actually is in the top 5 symbols of recognized worldwide.
Yeah. Along with the Coca-Cola product.
And the crucifix.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So actually, fun fact, Action Comics #1 became an immediate success.
Yay!
And thus, they were off to the races, and now we can jump into the fictional history of Superman.
Let's do it.
Now, Superman was born Kal-El of the planet Krypton. His father was an esteemed scientist, Jor-El, and his mother was a librarian named Laura.
I like that.
Yep. While Kal-El was still a toddler, his father discovered that the planet Krypton, or as Marlon Brando says it, Krypton. The planet Krypton. The planet Krypton.
It's an acting choice.
It teetered on the brink of absolute destruction. Realizing that there was not enough time to save everyone on the planet, he deposited his son inside a specifically designed rocket ship and launched him into outer space to Earth directly because he knew that Earth would give his son powers. And as Kal-El's rocket, of course, broke through the atmosphere of Krypton, Krypton exploded.
I like that you said he deposited his son, like, because I just imagine like this giant man like dropping a baby into a rocket. Yep. He's like, he's the Man of Steel. He'll be fine.
Well, the interesting thing about this is that he's not an infant.
No, he's a toddler, so he's a little less breakable.
Because that will change later on. After flying through space for an undetermined amount of time, they do not reveal how long it takes, which I've always liked that in Superman Origins. I like the fact that there is the possibility that Krypton might have exploded in Earth timeline, like somewhere in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
And because of time dilation and traveling faster in light, that's why Superman doesn't age.
You could also make the argument for, like, he could be in stasis when he's inside the ship, for all we know. Krypton's very advanced.
Yeah. I've always liked that. I like the idea that Krypton was, like, way... Like, he was in space for a long time.
Science!
Yep. Now, his rocket crashed in a small community named Smallville. Notice how I did not say Kansas. That will come later in possibly another geek history lesson. Just a place called Smallville.
Cool.
Though at first he was placed in an orphanage. Kal was soon adopted by the Kents and given the name Clark. And over time, he discovered his many powers. And during his teenager years, Clark met a strange visitor from another universe. His own counterpart, Superboy of Earth 1. And this is where the retcons start coming in.
Okay.
The more experienced Superboy from Earth 1 helped train Clark in the use of his powers. And during this period, Clark briefly worked as a circus strongman under the identity of the Masked Wonder.
That's a cute little callback to the origins of the character.
Yep.
Him working as a strongman. I like that.
Now, Mary Ma Kent later died. Now, notice it's Mary, not Martha.
I did notice that.
And when John Pa Kent was on his deathbed, he made Clark promise to use his powers for the good of mankind. Now, Clark's father calls Clark a Superman, inspiring Clark in the use of his name. And so Clark takes his father's advice and creates the identity of Superman.
That's lovely. That's also interesting that, you know, basically from his inception, that Superman's reverence and respect for his parents and the values that they instilled in him is what keeps him on the right track.
Exactly.
I love that.
Because he could break the planet in half.
Right. If he, man, they must have had the best teenager ever.
To be honest with you, this Superman can't.
Well,
because I'm going to get to his powers here very quickly.
Okay.
Now, Clark quickly earned himself a job as a reporter at the Daily Star, not the Daily Planet, after turning in a story about Superman's first public act.
Well, he's just riding his own coattails to the top.
Yep. But despite Superman's honorable intentions, Superman was not initially considered a hero and was in fact regarded as a vigilante working outside of the law.
Gasp.
And the legal authorities many times fired at him and tried to arrest him.
Wow.
Many of his earliest public actions showed Kal-El engaging in aggressive actions against wife beaters. These are some of Superman's first villains.
Okay.
Wife beaters, slumlords, social criminals, corrupt politicians, corrupt cops, and mobsters.
So this is 1938?
This is 1938.
This is surprisingly progressive, even by today's standards.
We'll get to how progressive it is once I start going summaries. Here we go.
Okay.
Now, to show you how different this Superman is, I thought it would be nice to summarize the first 10 issues of Superman, the first 10 stories.
Okay.
And to show you how crazy this Superman kind of is compared to what we think of as Superman.
Okay.
Now, this is the Superman that became so popular that it created a second solo title for him and led to Superman being continuously published for over 75 years. Now, at the time,
yes,
characters really didn't get solo titles.
No, that's very true.
So Superman was one of the first. He might be the first. I'm not certain about that. So here we go. Here's the summaries of the first 10 Superman stories. Now, also notice I did not say the first 10 issues of Action Comics.
I did notice that, in fact.
Okay, here we go. Action Comics issue number 1.
Okay.
It starts with a 1-page explanation of Superman's powers. He can leap 1/8 of a mile or a 20-story building.
Wow.
And again, notice that I said he can't fly.
Leaping is pretty impressive.
And nothing, it says in the text, nothing less than a bursting shell can penetrate his skin. So he's not completely invulnerable.
But close enough.
For 1938 times, he's a Mack truck. So there you go. All right, so here we go.
Such an American metaphor.
So in the issue, Superman shows up to the governor's mansion. They never say what state, but the governor.
Yeah. Naturally.
The attendant tells him that the governor is sleeping and he can't see him. And Superman breaks down the door and is like, "I'll see him now." But he's stopped at the governor's door, which is actually made of steel for some reason. And Superman breaks that door down too. He tells the governor that he has evidence that will save a woman that is going to be executed in less than 15 minutes.
Oh, and he's like, "That's why I broke into your house and threatened your manservant?"
Yep. The governor looks at these papers and calls the prison and gets her sentence immediately commuted. The next day at the Daily Star, the editor wants Kent to find out about this Superman. And then a tip on the phone comes into the Daily Star about a wife beating that is in progress.
Wow.
So Clark runs off and Superman runs into the apartment on the wife beating as Superman punches the husband, saying to the husband as the husband is flying through the air, "You're not fighting a woman now."
Okay.
Clark returns to his office after thoroughly beating the wife beater.
As you should.
And nervously asks Lois out for a date. Lois, of course, says yes. And while they're dancing on their date, Clark asks Lois, "Why do you always avoid me at the office, Lois?" Lois replies, "Please, Clark, I've been writing sob stories all day, so don't ask me to dish out another." That's literally exactly the line that she says.
Mean.
Oh, I'm going to flat out say it right now. I love Lois Lane. Golden Age Lois Lane is a bitch. A bitch and a prude.
She's not like, "Look, Smallville."
No. She's like, "You're a coward and I hate you."
I need there to be an action figure of Golden Age Lois Lane with an attachable speech bubble that says, "You're a coward and I hate you." That's amazing.
Okay. So, then a man tries to cut in on their dance, a tough, right? And Lois doesn't. And Lois doesn't want to dance with this man. And Clark just is nervous. Is like, "Well, just dance with the man, Lois. It'll be fine."
And then he'll go away.
Yeah. So Lois gets so mad that we're still in the first issue.
This is the best thing ever.
So Lois gets so mad at Clark that she slaps Clark and leaves Clark in disgust. But you see, But you see, that tough really wanted to dance, so he follows Lois in his car. He follows Lois's cab in his car. And Superman sees this, and Superman chases down the car, and when the driver sees him in the rearview mirror, he exclaims, "It's the devil himself!"
Well, you know.
And then Superman lifts the car like the image that we see on the very famous cover. And Lois sees Superman for the very first time. One of my favorite panels in all of Superman history. Superman comes close to Lois and he says, "You needn't be afraid of me. I won't harm you."
Well, that's Superman in a nutshell, isn't it?
Yep. The next morning, Lois tries to publish the Superman story, but the chief won't have it because he thinks it's ridiculous and absurd.
Well.
Yep. But instead, he sends Clark Kent to a country called Santa Monte to cover a war going on there. But of course, Clark doesn't go directly there. He takes a train and he stops in Washington, D.C.
Sure.
And
just on the way.
Yeah. And in Washington, D.C., Superman overhears a conversation between a politician and like a mobster trying to convince the politician to vote on a certain bill.
This is still the first issue?
We have not left the first issue yet.
This is like 3 plot points down now.
So Superman grabs the man trying to corrupt the senator and holds him as he runs along the electric lines of DC, runs on top of the electric lines.
I've seen pictures of that.
And then that's where Action Comics #1 ends. And here's a fun fact. Okay. So that's Action Comics #1, right?
That's bonkers.
Yep. So Action Comics #1 did really well.
Yeah.
Superman's not on the cover of Action Comics #2.
DC Comics, what you doing?
No,
what you doing?
Detective Comics.
DC
Comics technically doesn't exist now.
Detective Comics, what you doing?
Superman doesn't appear on the cover of issue 2.
Why not?
Or 3.
Why not?
Or 4. Or 5. Or 6. Superman does not appear on the cover of Action Comics until Action Comics issue 7.
Wow.
But he has stories in each of these issues, but they have other features. Goodness. So, and there's one of these covers that I thought was really funny that I'm going to describe to you because I can't believe that's the image they chose over Superman.
Okay.
So here you go. So let's jump to issue #2.
Okay, issue #2.
Now, these are going to become stories, so they won't be as long because they won't be the whole issue. They'll just be pieces of the issue.
Cool.
So here you go. So in issue #2, Superman goes to Santa Monte, like I said in the first issue, and he forces a munition manufacturer to join the army.
Okay.
Because he thinks he's like, oh, you're just making all these weapons. You don't know how to understand what it's like for the real man.
Sure.
This horrifies the wealthy man, and thus he returns to the United States and vows to never manufacture anything more dangerous than a firecracker.
I'm just saying that this would be a great lesson to put out in the world right now.
And then Superman returns back to Santa Monte and makes the 2 warring commanders stand down their army so they won't fight.
Wow.
That's the story.
Wow.
Issue #3 is called Superman Battles Death Underground.
That's like a upside beneath of Around the Mutant Planets of the Earth, Planets of the Ape kind of title. That's ridiculous.
So in issue 3, Superman saves some miners from a collapsed mine, which Superman believes happened because of unsafe mine conditions.
Probably.
So he hides as a worker, and while in the cave, Superman causes a cave-in while the owner of the mine is inside it. And when the owner of the cave discovers the safety conditions don't work, he vows to fix it all and makes his mine the safest in the world. And when Superman hears that, he clears the way to safety.
Oh, good job, Superman.
But you might be noticing a trend here.
I am noticing a trend
here. Issue #4, Superman takes down a corrupt football coach, and it's really not that interesting. So we're going to move on.
Okay. They can't all be gold stars.
Yep. Issue #5 is called The Big Scoop and is the birth of the Clark and Lois Lane rivalry.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the story for this one.
Okay.
The editor of the Daily Star learns that the Valley Ho Dam is in danger of cracking because of torrential rain.
Okay.
Clark is nowhere to be found, so Lois demands the story. But the editor of the Daily Star thinks the story is too dangerous for a woman.
He's like, look, girly.
Yeah. Yes, girly, you can't take this.
But I got moxie.
Well, Lois does have moxie, and she's so insulted
that
she tracks down Clark and then feeds Clark misinformation so that he will go on a wild goose chase that's not the dam so that Lois can go to the dam and get the story.
Oh, Lois, that's mean.
Mad that Clark let himself get scooped by Lois, the editor then fires Clark Kent from the Daily Star.
Wow.
So Clark dresses up as Superman, heads to the dam, And actually, because he goes there as Superman, he actually beats Lois there, but he's still unable to stop the dam from cracking.
Okay.
So he still has to save Lois, but he's able to save the city because he's able to divert the water away from the city. Superman then calls in the scoop about the flood being diverted as Clark and regains his job.
That's lucky.
Which infuriates Lois to no end.
I'm sure.
How did Clark beat me at the story?
He wasn't even there.
Yep. Now we're going to go to issue 6, which is a story that I think is brilliant. The Man Who Sold Superman. A man named Nick Williams claims to be Superman's personal manager and offers Clark Kent an interview.
God, that is such an LA thing to do.
Clark takes him up on his offer, but not before Lois grabs Clark and tells him to take her to dinner. During the dinner, Lois drugs Clark.
Wait.
Yep.
We got reverse roofies going on?
Lois Lane roofies Clark Kent and takes the meeting instead. But Lois at the meeting is unconvinced by the actor that Nick hired to play Superman. So Nick Williams throws her out of a window when she threatens to reveal the scam. But luckily for Lois, Superman, the drugs didn't affect him, and he's actually waiting outside the building and catches Lois and exposes Williams as a fraud.
He's like, this is going to go south. I'll just wait outside the window.
Issue number 7 is a very sweet story. Clark is sent to interview the head of the Jordan Circus that came to town, and he overhears the owner sad that it will go broke because the circus has to pay off the mob. Clark sees the show there, and he actually says this, that it lacks flash. So Superman takes pity on the circus and shows up to the circus saying that he will be the circus's new strongman.
Yes.
And during the show, he lifts an elephant, he juggles the other strongmen, does all these crazy things.
He juggles the other strongmen?
He juggles the other strongmen and an elephant at the same time.
That's amazing. I want that on a t-shirt.
So the mobmen see this and they realize that this circus is going to go through the roof, make so much money, that they start to cause accidents because they are afraid that the course of the circus is going to be too successful. But
can't have that happening.
But Superman stops the mobsters and saves the circus. In the B plot, there is a Daily Star worker named Curly who keeps flipping out Clark Kent's tie. You know, it's tucked in the front of your suit, and he keeps flipping out Clark Kent's tie every time he walks by. But Clark never gets mad about it. So, and Curly keeps remarking about like, oh, it's so crazy. So one moment at the very end of the issue, when Curly is walking into an office, Superman runs at super speed and pulls all of Curly's clothing off, making him completely naked in public in an instant.
To what end?
Because Superman wins at the very you don't tug on Superman's cape.
I guess not.
We move on to issue number 8, and Superman is not on the cover again.
Aw.
This is the funniest cover of all.
Okay.
The cover of Action Comics number 8 is an Indian, a Native American, fighting a British soldier.
Awesome.
There's like struggling.
So good.
Yeah, there you go.
And they were like, this is more interesting than the Man of Tomorrow.
Yep. Well, actually, because the story in issue 8 is quite forgettable because Superman tries to save a bunch of kids and the bad tenements they live in. They kind of live in a ghetto. So Superman, to save the kids, decides to break apart the building in every building in this tenement area because he figures that if he breaks them all, they'll have to rebuild them and the people can live there.
That's a terrible idea.
Well, it is terrible because Superman starts bashing down these buildings all in Man of Steel style, and the army is sent in to stop him.
Wow.
But the end of the story just jumps ahead in time and they all have new apartment buildings, unexplainable, and they're like, yay, thank you, Superman.
The ends justified the means.
Yeah, but literally there's like pages in this where Superman is like destroying apartment buildings.
Wow. That's
Issue 9 actually has a race car on the cover.
Awesome. Is Superman in, around, or lifting the race car?
No, just a race car. Superman's not on the cover. In this issue, the police are in full force as they hire Captain Riley to capture Superman.
Okay.
When Clark asks Lois out on a date, she actually says that she despises Clark and that she truly only loves Superman.
You're a coward and I hate you.
Now, here's the fun thing about this. Clark quickly walks to another office room and starts laughing out loud because he thinks it's hilarious.
I love that. That's fantastic.
Quickly, Captain Riley offers a $5,000 reward for the capture of Superman, and a man named Mortimer, he finds Clark's clothes in an alleyway during one of the times that Superman is out rescuing somebody. And in the clothes, he finds a note that says going to the Duncan reception. Mortimer, of course, tells Captain O'Reilly, hey, I found the clothes of Superman, blah, blah, blah. So the police show up at the Duncan reception. Clark is there. And just before he was going to be searched and have his costume, of course, be revealed, Mortimer turns off the lights because O'Reilly wasn't going to give him his $5,000 reward. So when he flicks off the lights, Clark is able to run out, take off his clothes, run back in, and appear as Superman.
Well, that's handy dandy.
And of course, he bashes in O'Reilly and Mortimer's heads, solving the issue.
Everything with brain damage.
Yep. Now we get to issue 10 of Action Comics, and Superman is finally back on the cover.
Yay!
And in this, Superman helps to overthrow a cruel prison warden who is torturing his prisoners. And that's about it. That's all you need to know. Of course, he pretends to be one of the prisoners and gets the prison wardener to be tortured. And the prison warden is like, oh, I miss my ways. Oh, I should be a better prison warden.
Yeah.
There you go. And the issue ends with an ad saying, Superman, the strip sensation of 1939 in every issue of Action Comics. Tell your friends.
Tell your friends.
Yep.
That's funny.
You can also tell your friends about the podcast sensation of Geek History Lesson, friends, and all the fantastic extras you can get at patreon.com/Geek History Lesson. For $3 of support, you can keep down the commies, but you can also get the episodes a day early. Or for $5 a month, you can get the Patreon exclusive podcast Geek History Lesson Extra, which is 20 more minutes of yapping. Ashley and Jason yapping about all the subjects you want to know, like all those talkies you're looking at. And the nickel dime theaters. I'm running out of steam here. Patreon.com/Jawiin is where the true heroes of adventure support the artists that they love and back to more daring adventures of Superman.
I thought that was tremendously done.
Patreon.com/Jawiin. I ran out of air. I need to take a drink real quick. So vamp, Ashley.
Well, that's what happens when you talk like an old-timey guy or when you talk like Varric. But now we're going to do more Superman stuff.
I mean, they all had chewing tobacco and cigarettes. That's how they got through it.
Yeah, really.
Now, as you can tell, I've given you a primer. I've given you a nice base foundation of Superman.
Solid.
And you can kind of tell that the Golden Age adventures of Superman, by our standards, of course, are a little silly.
Well,
but I like that they're very socially conscious.
They are. I'm actually kind of surprised by how relevant they are.
Yes. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit, and we're going to summarize a bit more because we got to get to 1956.
Okay.
Okay, Ashley, I want to ask you: do you know who Superman's first supervillain was?
No. Can I guess?
Yes.
I would assume that it is Lex Luthor in some form or another.
It is not Lex Luthor.
I would guess that it's Brainiac.
It is not Brainiac.
Well, I'm all out of ideas.
It is the Ultra Humanite.
That weird monkey guy?
Yes, but at this time he was bald and looked exactly like Lex Luthor.
Oh, yeah. I've seen pictures of that.
Well, as I mentioned, if you remember earlier, the Golden Age Superman has very distinct differences from what we know as Superman. Mm-hmm. So there's that, for instance. Also, Superman didn't have a Fortress of Solitude during this time. He had a place called the Secret Citadel, which basically just had a giant workout center inside.
Awesome.
Yep. Now, Superman continued to be the most successful character in comics during this period. His solo book quickly went from being a quarterly to a bi-monthly book.
Wow.
And he would also get a lead slot in World's Finest Comics, which was a follow-up to the New York World's Fair specials. And these comics would feature both Superman and Batman. That's the reason why they're called World's Finest.
That is a true and scientific fact.
Yep. Even though every story is credited to Siegel and Schuster, this is completely untrue.
Oh, really?
Yes. Actually, Schuster stayed on the strip longer than he did any of his other creations. But the sheer volume of Superman stories with Action Comics and the solo title and World's Finest necessitated them bringing on other artists and other writers. Wayne Boring actually would be one of the greatest influences at the time because he is the one that is given credit for the Superman shield on Superman's chest becoming what we think of it as today with the triangular kind of pentagon design.
Yeah, the kind of diamond shape.
Because before then it was kind of like a gold shield with a red S and like it did all kinds of different stuff.
It wasn't as stylized, I would say.
Yeah, Wayne Boring's the one that's responsible for what we think of as this stylized Superman shield.
Thanks, Wayne. You do good work.
Yep. Now, during these further adventures, we learn that Clark actually, and this is a fun fact, Clark actually has a massive clock collection and collects clocks.
That's weird.
It actually has never been mentioned again.
That's super.
Yep.
That would be a great detail to introduce if you were doing.
I would do it now.
Yeah, like if we were going to see his apartment in Metropolis, like, and he had a room that was just full of clocks, and they're like, why? He's like, I just like to see time fly.
There you go. It's very funny. In Action Comics number 69, we learn for the first time that his X-ray vision cannot see through lead. He also uses super breath for the first time and super hypnosis, which actually almost gets overused during this time to prevent Lois from discovering his identity.
Yeah.
Now, also during this time period, as I mentioned a couple times, the editor of the Daily Star, his name was actually George Taylor.
Okay.
But by 1941, Clark is suddenly under the Daily Planet under Perry White.
Great.
Now, these changes were done to correspond to the very popular Superman radio show, but it was actually poorly executed in the comics because in Action Comics number 22, the Daily Star sends Lois and Clark to the European country of Galonia when it is invaded by Toran. But in issue 23, they file their story on the same invasion with the Daily Planet.
Okay.
So it flip-flops. And George Taylor and Perry White kind of do that a couple times, too.
So those editors weren't doing their jobs?
They were just get them out the door.
Yeah, for real.
And again, like I said, George Taylor's appearance alters because sometimes he's heavy, sometimes he's old, sometimes he's smoking a cigar.
Oh, really?
And in Superman number 7, he abruptly changes his name to Perry White, even though he's drawn the exact same way as George Taylor.
Well, Perry White's a more distinctive name, so I think it was a better choice, really.
In Superman number 11, Lois first notices that Clark is never around when Superman is, and she wonders, is it possible that, and this goes on for about a year until a story in Superman number 17 in which Lois tries to prove that Clark is really Superman. And of course she fails, but this will go on for decades.
For literally the rest of time.
Yes. Jimmy Olsen is slowly and surely worked into the comic books. Again, Jimmy first made his appearance in the Superman radio series and was retroactively combined with an unnamed office boy that appeared in several early issues of Action Comics.
Hey, unnamed office boy, bring me a pencil.
In Superman number 5, the boy actually has brown hair and no name. And in issue number 13, he's finally called Jimmy. And it's not until Superman 15 that he's actually called Jimmy Olsen.
Wow. I want to imagine that there's just like this Lost Boys collection of young men working at the Daily Planet.
Now we're going to get even crazier. Jimmy doesn't get his red hair and bow tie until Action Comics number 49.
Really?
And a few months later, in World's Finest number 6, it's finally revealed that him and Clark are friends.
Wow.
So there you go.
That took longer than I would have expected.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
The Daily Planet's iconic globe that sits atop their building finally debuts in this era, although different artists changed their mind on whether they wanted to draw it or not. So sometimes it shows up and sometimes it doesn't.
Awesome.
Yep.
Continuity.
And then Superman's greatest supervillain finally debuts. Who is that, Ashley?
Lex Luthor.
That is right. Lex Luthor debuts in Action Comics number 23. He actually has no first name during this time and a healthy crop of red hair.
Awesomely.
Yep. He would go through the entire period without getting a first name, but actually his hair doesn't last more than a year. He makes 2 appearances following Action Comics 23 the following month, both in the pages of Superman number 4, threatening Metropolis with an earthquake machine, and then attempting to raise the sunken city of Pacific, that's with a Q at the end. He also tries to steal the oil from Oklahoma to power the machines to raise it, and he tries to flood the California coast.
I like that that the first season of Arrow lifted the earthquake machine to end out their first season.
It's a good way to end it. In Luthor's 4th appearance in Superman number 10, Luthor is suddenly bald with no explanation.
Well, bald guys are scary, I guess.
In Superman number 10, he's developed an invisibility ray that he uses with his gang to help rob banks. And I'm going to put it out there right now that I think he accidentally used the invisibility ray on his hair.
And that's where it went? Head canon accepted. That's amazing.
Yep. Now, a Superman villain called the Puzzler debuts in Action Comics number 49 and returns in Superman number 20. He's actually a professional-looking man with glasses and a Van Dyke beard.
Ooh.
And the Puzzler considers himself a master of games, leaving clues for Superman to figure out who he is.
Boy, this sure does sound like a couple other villains I know.
Yeah, what other villain does this sound like?
This sounds a lot like Riddler.
Now, I looked it up because I wanted to see. The Riddler actually did not debut until 1948, so the Puzzler predates the Riddler.
It also sounds like Clue Master.
Yeah, but I always thought the Clue Master was a low-rent Riddler anyway. So
Totally.
Yep.
But I think that's very interesting.
World's Finest number 6 is the only appearance of Metallo in the Golden Age.
Golden Age Metallo, though, has one of the best, most patchwork put together looks ever.
Well, because this Metallo is simply a man in a powerful metal suit.
Yes.
Though for much of the tale, many people in the street believe him to be an alien robot.
Interesting.
Yeah. Action Comics number 51 is the debut of the Prankster, who is a master con artist who is a comedian. He has an oversized collar and ugly green plaid jacket that they've kept to this day.
Yeah.
The prankster pretends to rob banks, but in fact leaves money for them each time. And this is all a plan to have one banker open his vault so he can get the millions of jewels and stocks inside that vault.
The stocks, baby, the stocks.
Yep. The Toyman debuted in Action Comics number 64.
Ooh, pretty significant part of Supergirl.
Yep. He's revealed as an aging toy maker with a mop of long, curly blonde hair, and he decides to use the toys he builds for crime. In the first tale, the toys prove to be bombs, and he uses a toy Superman to escape from prison in Superman number 27 and opens a high-end arcade, using it to entertain the crowds, to distract them so he can rob them.
I love it.
Yep.
Love it.
And soon Kryptonite was introduced. Ashley, what is Kryptonite?
Kryptonite is this green rock that saps all of Superman's powers, and in some incarnations, its strength depends on who's writing it. Basically.
Exactly. Now, Kryptonite at the time had already appeared again in the Superman radio show. Now, the first stories dealing with Jor-El and Laura were eventually printed after this time.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, they after Kryptonite. And this actually is what a lot of people believe opened the door to a science fiction universe that would eventually become what all Superman tales are about, as Superman in the 1950s would basically become a sci-fi series.
Well, the alien of it all.
Yep. Also, during this time, Superman's origin gets retold, and it's expanded with developments that had taken place at that point. It's happened in Superman number 53, which is billed as the 10th anniversary of the character.
Wow.
Jor-El and Laura, Superman's parents, are introduced, and their world of Krypton is introduced, and it's doomed to destruction because of its unstable uranium core this time.
Very topical.
Yep. Jor-El presents his findings to the council. He's laughed at. Jor-El only has a small rocket and carries his child Kal-El. Now, this time, the rocket lands on Earth and is found by John and Mary Kent, and this is the first time that we learn Pa Kent's first name.
Oh, really?
Before this, he was only known as Pa.
Pa.
Also, it's the first time that we learn the maiden name of Mary Clark, which is how Clark got his name.
Yes.
This is the first time this was mentioned. Now, also, Superman remembers his days as Super Baby in Superman 73. And fun fact, Superboy, by this point, had been running around for a number of years, but this is actually the first tale in the book to show young Clark Kent for any extended period of time, because the story introduces the idea of Super Baby Boy / man's costume made from blankets that were found in the rocket from Krypton.
I like that idea. I do. I think that's very sweet.
I like the idea that the cape is his blanket.
Yes.
But the rest of it I kind of think is ridiculous.
Well, it's the Golden Age.
Yep. The first detailed depiction of Superman's microscopic vision appeared in World's Finest number 48, and it's the only story of this era to really delve into one of his powers.
Okay.
Now, the story deals with a scientist who creates what appears to be a super strong form of steel, knowing that it will molecularly collapse and disintegrate in a year.
Okay.
When this begins happening, Superman rushes from disaster to disaster, trying to save people from collapsing bridges, derailing trains, and falling buildings. And Wayne Boring, again, I've mentioned him.
Yep.
He used a really cool visual to show the microscopic vision. And as Superman uses it on the steel to determine what is wrong with it. Now, the scientist who did this almost falls victim himself.
Oh, no.
As he never considered how many buildings had been built with his crappy product. So
social responsibility.
Yeah. Also during this time, a number of famous people, famous at the time, got to team up with Superman in this era. I want to see if you know them.
Okay.
So Superman teamed up with Ralph Edwards.
I don't know who that is.
Well, actually, Ralph Livingston Edwards is an American radio and television host, best known for his radio TV game show, Truth or Consequences, and This Is Your Life.
Sure.
I didn't know who that was, so
I don't.
Superman also teamed up with very famous actress Anne Blythe.
I do know who Anne Blythe is.
Oh, really? Who is she?
I just know the name.
Oh, she's an actress from movies like The Great Caruso, Brute Force, and The Student Prince. And her storyline with Superman is called Superman and the Mermaid.
Ooh.
Superman also teamed up with Perry Como.
Musician?
And he's an American singer and television personality.
There you go.
And Superman teamed up with Orson Welles.
I know who Orson Welles is. He has the Rich and Famous contracts.
Yes, and he directed Citizen Kane.
Yes.
Now, Action Comics number 131 features a Luthor story that would eventually be adapted as the second of the Superman movie serials.
Okay.
Now, Luthor has invented a machine that moves people and objects into and out of the fourth dimension. And he announces the plans for his next crime to Lois Lane, including intending the press to cover the crime as he transports men from the scene. Now, Clark Kent writes the story for the Daily Planet and winds up on the chopping block when Perry White and the Planet get sued by Luthor's thieves for slander.
For slander.
Yep. Now Luthor transports them across the country, and they have witnesses place them thousands of miles away. And Clark finds that his reputation has been ruined, and no other paper will hire him now.
Oh no!
Luthor then uses the machine on Superman, trapping Superman in the fourth dimension, and essentially this puts Superman in the same state as the Phantom Zone, even though they won't introduce the Phantom Zone for many, many years.
Okay.
But as with the Phantom Zone, Superman finds that he is able to influence an electric typewriter. Although that is credited the story as having a wonderful sensitivity to the machine himself. Lois gets to act as Superman's agent, finding Luthor and reversing the machine to free Superman. So Superman sends a message to Lois, and Lois helps out.
Oh, that's nice of Lois.
So there you go. Action Comics number 141 marks the first story in which Lex Luthor creates kryptonite.
Ooh.
And then comes an introduction of a great Superman villain. My second favorite Superman villain. Mr. Mxyzptlk.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Mxyzptlk has romance problems in his first appearance during this period in Superman number 51. There seems to be a new king in Zurf. That's where he's from.
I know.
Not the fifth dimension, Zurf, at this time, who needs to marry off his daughter and picks Mxyzptlk for the groom. Mxyzptlk lies, claiming to be engaged to Lois Lane, and heads to Earth to marry her.
Awesome.
Lois insists that Mr. Mxyzptlk would have to prove himself as good as a reporter as she is for her to marry him. This is, of course, is very bizarre.
Sure.
But as a way to go into the next act of the story, the imp uses his magic to outdo her as a reporter. And Perry White puts them in direct competition to get a 3-question interview with Superman. Now, Perry White, he sees this magical imp. He's not like, what the hell are you doing, and get out of here. Great Caesar's ghost. He says, hey, you impy, if you can get a 3-question interview with Superman, I'll hire you.
You can marry Lois Lane. I don't care.
Yeah. Mxyzptlk outwits Lois and gets his answers during a battle banter, battle of banter with Superman. But Lois actually lives up to her words and heads to the altar. And right before she is able to marry Mxyzptlk, Superman tricks Mxyzptlk into saying his name backwards, which sends him back to his home dimension.
Goddamn right. Also, I think that is interesting because historically and in the traditions of mythology, doing that, saying the name backwards of either a dragon or a demon will send them back from whence they came.
Interesting.
So, fun fact.
Superman during this time also helped to establish the Justice Society of America. Due to various personal adventures, Superman was only able to join the Justice Society as an honorary member.
Aww.
It was also around this time the Golden Age finally came to an end, and this Superman would disappear to what would eventually be known as Earth 2. But we will find out more about them when we return to tell you more about Superman in a future Geek History lesson called Superman: The Silver Age.
Oh, that's so sad.
But we're going to talk about Superman and other media during this time.
Okay.
Now, instead of telling you about Superman and media forever, again, I'm only going to tell you from this time period. the Superman media. And there's a lot of it, actually.
Okay.
During the 1940s, there was The Adventures of Superman. It was a radio series starring Bud Collyer, or Collier, it might be how you say it, as the voice of Superman, and Joan Alexander as Lois.
Yes.
And here's a funny story about that radio show.
Okay.
In 1946, civil rights activist Stetson Kennedy contacted the producers of the radio show and made them an interesting proposal.
Okay.
He claimed that he had a lot of information about the Ku Klux Klan's inner workings, including secret passwords and the like. And he was having trouble getting the Southern law enforcement to do anything with this information, because he's kind of like, you can take down the Klan with this information.
Yeah, this is a crazy amount of intrigue that I did not expect for the radio show.
So he thought that publicizing this information via a radio program would embarrass the Ku Klux Klan and temporarily throw a wrench into their workings.
Not a bad idea.
Now, the writers and executives at DC Comics were thrilled at the chance to actually fight for real truth, justice, and the American way, right?
That's awesome.
And they plotted an arc called Superman versus the Ku Klux Klan.
Awesome. And
it hit the air. It was broadcast.
Awesome.
Ratings were huge.
Yeah.
And in fact, in Stephen Dubner's and Stephen D. Levitt's Freakonomics, they claim that the show had the intended effect of ridiculing the Klan and publicizing its secret passwords, and thus visibly aiding the cause of civil rights in America.
Wow.
However, the amount of inside information about the KKK was actually revealed to be kind of exaggerated.
Sure.
And a review of all 16 episodes of Clan of the Fiery Cross storyline reveals that no actual passwords were revealed on air.
But the intended effect was had.
So a Superman radio show of Superman fighting the Ku Klux Klan actually happened.
That's the greatest thing. That's the best gift you could have given me for this Geek History lesson. That's freaking amazing.
Isn't that cool?
Yes. Now I want to go find it.
All right. Let's talk about some more Superman stuff.
Okay.
In 1948, Superman, it was a serial in 15 chapters starring Kirk Alyn and Noel Neill. It recounts the origin story of Superman, and he fights the Spider Lady.
Oh, okay.
In 1950, Atom Man vs. Superman was a serial in 15 parts, still starring Kirk Alyn and Noel Neill.
Okay.
And he fights the Atom Man and Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
And from 1952 to 1958, The Adventures of Superman, starring George Reeves and Phyllis Coates, and only in season 1 as Lois. And then they brought Noel Neill from the serials to be Lois.
Well, they must have really loved her.
Was the TV show of, dun da da, dun da da,
yeah,
dun da dun, and he leaps on the trampoline to go out the windows. Mm-hmm. George Reeves, one of the great Supermans, and also we could not talk about Superman and other media during this time without mentioning the 1941 to 1943 Fleischer Studios animated theatrical cartoons. 17 shorts of Superman starring Bud Collyer. And they drew this on black paper, this cartoon, which is why it pops.
It's beautiful.
And it's the reason why Bruce Timm did the same thing for Batman the Animated Series, because he was inspired by the Fleischer Superman Animated Series. And that is the Geek History lesson on Superman, the Golden Age.
Wow.
So there you go.
Really cool.
So there you go. A lot of research went into that. I was surprised I was able to get through it so quick.
Wow.
Let's go to some recommended reading. Just to let you guys know, you can buy any of these books that I'm going to recommend at geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading. All you got to do is look for the lesson, click on the book. It'll take you directly to Amazon, and faster than a speeding bullet, a little bit of that purchase comes our way. Help keeps the Golden Age away.
Yeah.
My first choice is Superman, the Golden Age, Volume 1 softcover. This collects Action Comics 1 through 19. Mm-hmm. So if you want some enjoyable Superman stories, let me tell you, even if you don't like Golden Age comic books, they're worth reading just to see where superhero comics started. They all come from these issues.
And I would say that some of the coolest things about revisiting them, and it takes time to get into that headspace, takes a couple pages. You notice even from the beginning how many elements were already in place.
Yeah.
And I think it gives you an appreciation of why we're still using those same story beats and why we're still celebrating the same parts of these characters 75 plus years later.
Yes, exactly. I mean, because you have to think about, like, whatever you think, whether Superman or Batman's your favorite, Batman only happened because of Superman.
In reaction to Superman.
Yeah, because Detective Comics went to Bob Kane and said, we need you to create something like Superman.
Yep. Dark and gritty.
Yep. Now, there's also an omnibus, a hardcover omnibus of that same collection.
Very nice.
Just depends on whether you want softcover or the hardcover omnibus. The softcover is much cheaper, just to let you know.
Well,
there's also a great story collection called Superman, A Celebration of 75 Years. It's a hardcover. Action Comics #1 is in it, and some of these other Golden Age tales, and then it jumps through the future and has modern day stories. And then there's also a fun one. There's Superman, The Golden Age Sundays. It's the 1943 and 1946. Now, this collects 170 sequential Sunday pages that have never been reprinted before except for this book, including some classic comics that began in 1943. Cool. And they kind of fill like a major gap in the Superman mythos. So there you go. And now we're going to move on to our teaching tweet.
Yes, where in 140 characters or less, Professor Jason will sum up the incredible amount of history that he just laid down at our feet.
Yes. Here's my teaching tweet. Up on the power lines. It's a strong man who's going to punch me in the face and rebuild my tenement housing. Superman! Dun, 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 dun. Before we wrap up, I thought we'd have a really quick discussion. I just want to hear your opinions. Ashley, you said as we started this podcast that you had not read any of the Golden Age Superman.
True.
What do you think about Golden Age Superman? What are your thoughts? I just gave you the lesson. What do you think about this character? And is it surprising that this character became the character that we know it as today? Or are you surprised this character? I mean, just what do you think about Golden Age Superman, I guess?
I'm sad that Lois Lane was a bit of a dick.
Yep.
That's the thing that I'm sad by. I'm a little bit surprised at how progressive he was, and we did touch on that a couple times. Although I think that when you look at the fact that he was created by two young hip cats,
poor immigrants
who lived in New York, which is a fairly progressive city, even in the 1930s. I find it less surprising, but still, there's some things where you're like, oh wow, like well done. I don't think it's surprising, especially when you consider the fact that he's the first one. There's a reason that he stands as the ultimate superhero. It's a reason why you had to kind of specialize after that. I don't think there's anything surprising about why the characters lasted. And I think that a lot of the evolution from that point makes a lot of sense. But at its core, like he's still the same. He's the same guy.
And he's just less rambunctious now.
Sure, but that's the way storytelling is now.
Yeah.
But like it's still that he's an immigrant character who was raised in the heartland and exemplifies what America's all about. He goes to the city, he works, he puts his head down. He's a superhero with a heart of gold. He'll save Lois even though she's mean to him. Like that. All those basic tenets of him is still there, like who he is at his core. But yeah, I think there's no reason. I mean, if someone told me that, like, wow, I read 10 Golden Age Superman stories and I can't believe that it lasted, I'd be like, really? Why?
Well, I will say that to me, it was so different than anything else that was out there. And that's why. The reason why I think a modern person could read the Golden Age Superman and be like, I don't get how it lasted, is because they've read everything that's come after. But when you clear your mind space and you read that with the idea that there's nothing else, there's no other superheroes out there, then I think you're just like, what the hell is this? Because I think it's interesting. I think in those first 10 issues of Action Comics, you see an element in Superman that you see in other characters that just grab your imagination.
Batman's the same way.
Batman. I was going to say Sherlock Holmes. I was going to say Captain Kirk. I was going to say the Doctor.
Yeah.
You see something in that main character that makes you go, I want to know more about this guy. This guy is so fascinating how he does things. I need to know more about him.
And if you do as a social experiment, if you want to see kind of what a lot of the other comics were doing at the time, go get your hands on, I think it is Pep number 11, where Archie makes his first appearance, because it's terrible.
What year is that?
I think it's the 30s. I think it is pre-Superman, but I don't have it looked up right now. But like,
because Superman's June 38.
Because young romance comics and westerns were kind of, and war comics were kind of the orders of the day.
Exactly.
And this would have been so fresh and so exciting and so innovative, even though like when you read them and when you read the Batman stuff too, it feels very rushed because now we spend all these time on these origin stories. It's not just a paragraph and then boom, you're in these adventures.
Yep.
But it would have been like when Star Wars hit for the first time. It was such a shift in the zeitgeist.
Yep.
Yeah, man. Superman's cool.
Cool. There you go. That's it for the Golden Age Superman. Sometime in the future, we will cover Superman, the Silver Age, which will take Superman from the 1950s all the way into the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be an interesting time. And we'll get to talk about all these weird, like, Lois has been turned into a grasshopper.
Yeah, for real, though.
I'll have to do a lot of reading for those.
Lois has been turned into a grasshopper.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what some of them that they did. So,
it was the best.
I mean, if you guys want to see that, all you need to do is just tell us when you guys want to hear us jump into the next edition of Superman, and they can do that on which of our social medias, Ashley?
Well, you can go to facebook.com/geekhistorylesson, or you can go to geekhistorylesson.com. All of the appropriate modes of communications for us are open.
And don't forget, you can find this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/geekhistorylesson. And let's social outreach just like Superman. I would like if all of our listeners would suggest this episode to one person that doesn't listen to Geek History Lesson, to be like, hey guy, hey you,
hey guy,
hey you there in the sitting across from me in the microphone. I know you don't know nothing about Golden Age Superman.
That's pretty much accurate.
Listen to this podcast.
Oh, yeah. I guess I will.
So I'm going to throw that challenge out to all of our listeners to help us grow this podcast, because I think I did a hell of a job.
You did. And then tweet us a picture of you listening to it together.
Yeah, there you go. You can come and complain to us on Twitter about Geek History Lesson, or tell us how much you liked this episode, and tell me what you did and did not know about Golden Age Superman. You can do it on my Twitter at Jawiin, Jawiin, and Ashley's Twitter at Ashley V. Robinson. Well, the sun is set, the war is over, and the Golden Age has come to an end.
Aww.
I'm Jason Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson, and Professor L, since you've done such a magnanimous job, why don't you take us out of the Golden Age?
It's time for this talky podcast radio show to come to an end. Bye, Folgers.